To order the Richmond City Council meeting for Tuesday, October 12th. Madam Clerk, on the minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship. There can be a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular council meeting held on September 27th, adopt the minutes of the special council meeting held on October 4th, 2021, and receive for information the Metro Vancouver Board in Brief dated September 24th.
Moved and seconded. Councillor McNulty.
Thank you, Worship. Vancouver Board and Brief has some very interesting items in it, and I'd like to ask you or Councillor Steves about the clean air plan that says urgent action was needed to accelerate the greenhouse gas reductions and meet ambitious science-based climate targets, etc. And it said in it, it included 28 foundational big moves that need to be started as soon as possible. Can you or Councillor Steves elaborate on that?
Councillor Steves, I think you're on the committee. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, well, one of the big moves we're working on right now is banning all wood fires, banning burning on farms and that sort of stuff. That's the first thing. The next one is changing large equipment that has been exempt for years, that produces lots of smoke and greenhouse gases. So we're sort of going through a whole list. But at the top of the list right now is replacing wood burning stoves with other means of heating, or with basically what you call airtight wood stoves if that's not available. So there's quite a long list and a progression to clean the air.
Your Worship.
I can get a copy of the report and I'll circulate.
Yeah, I think it's important we get a copy of the report, but more importantly, have our staff look at it and see the things that we're already doing and sure, that may apply to us. As well, I guess I'm very surprised on CNCL 27 in looking at the Climate Action Committee. They're talking about diverting asphalt and wood waste. I thought we already had that. I know what we do. We recycle our asphalt. I know we recycle wood, etc. But Metro Vancouver hasn't done that yet, or we haven't done it as a region. I guess that's back to
well,
you.
as it says, we're working on it.
We're working on it, okay.
The asphalt, we're doing we're using the recycled asphalt on number 5 road, and now we're going to go to some other roads. It's a collaboration with the National Zero Waste Council. So
well, I think we all have to work together on this, and obviously if we can get some ideas from Metro Vancouver, it's important. And I guess also, Your Worship, on the 28th, we have the Zero Waste Conference for right, the day. I believe you chair that, and it's worthwhile. We went to it, been to a couple, and I think it's extremely important. Now, are the members of the public allowed to go to that?
That is for the members of the public. I don't chair it or co-chair it anymore. But I did for a number of years. It's a first class, it's actually international class of conference that they put on. It's well worth it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So with that, we'll call the question then. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is carried. Any agenda additions and deletions?
Thank you, Your Worship. We have one agenda correction, and it's related to CNCL 5 of the agenda for item 11, the Consolidated Fees Bylaw 8636. The actual amendment bylaw needs to be amended to include the schedule regarding the soil deposit and removal bylaw fees, and this was outlined in a memo that was already distributed to Council.
All right, may I have a motion on the agenda with that addition?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any comments on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. We don't have any delegations tonight, so we don't need to resolve any committee of the whole. It brings me to the consent agenda. Now, the item on the temporary patio program update has been taken off for reasons which will become apparent soon. So we have the receipt of committee minutes, the Blue Cabin Floating Artist Residency, the award of contract to Tibco Software for data analytics business intelligence implementation, The amendments to the Consolidated Five-Year Financial Plan, 2021 to 2025, the Consolidated Fees Bylaw and Amendment Bylaw, the Permissive Property Tax Exemption Bylaw, the Land Use Application for first reading, which goes to public hearing November 15th, which is 13340 Smallwood Place, a zoning text amendment to the vehicle sales, the CV zone. And finally, the appointment of approving officer. May I have a motion for those by consent?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. I will be supporting everything on tonight's consent agenda. I just wanted to point out a couple things. I'm excited that the Regional Animal Protection Society will be getting a text amendment to continue to allow them to have their veterinary services at the Auto Mall. I know that they've put a lot of effort. There's a lot of volunteers and a lot of people who've put a lot of work into creating this space to heal our best furry friends, and so to allow them to keep using this space and not have to move it and refit another place, I think is really valuable for the community. I'd also like to point out, though, as well, the Consolidated Fee Bylaw 8636, the amendment to the soil. We're just going the next step in protecting our farmland here. So we're increasing the security deposit from $15,000 to $200,000 if you're getting more than 600 cubic meters of fill put on your property. So we're not going to be seeing people put bad fill on their property. We've done a lot of things to have the farmers track where the soil's coming from, that the soil that they're getting is the soil that's actually being put on their land. And now this is making sure that if there's any mess up, that there's the money there to fix it and remediate the problem. So we've really done a lot to make sure that people aren't taking on illegal fill and that the fill that they are getting is good soil to be added to Richmond. And so a sizable security deposit really makes a huge difference to that, I think. And then the final thing I'd like to say is that our permissive property tax exemption. So just as we do in other years, we have a permissive property tax exemption to support our religious organizations and not-for-profit institutions so that they can focus on the good work that they do in the community and not have to work on just trying to pay property taxes for some of their large facilities that they have. Certainly, I think probably everyone in our community has used or is a part of or volunteers with one of these many organizations. And I think that it just shows how we're supporting our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see now. Councillor Steves. Harold?
Thank you very much. I just want to echo what Councillor Liu said about the new fees and soils. People will think twice now before they put illegal soil on their property. I can recall some years ago, one property up on Sidaway Road, a person bought about a 5 or 6 acre field, beautiful field. When he went and plowed the field, he plowed up plastic and garbage that have been buried there and hidden. And of course, the previous owners got away with it. There were no fines or no ways of going after them. That will have changed with this particular change in the fee service. I do want to talk about the Blue Cabin Floating Artist Residency. I'm really happy about this one, because historically, while they weren't artist residencies, Steveston probably had the largest number of floating homes of any place in the Lower Mainland. In the heyday of the fishing industry, the waterfront was lined with houses on barges all up and down the channel. Finn Slough was one of them, and all along the Steveston waterfront. The last one was bulldozed in 1972 when Hong Wo store was knocked down. Part of the Hong Wo store complex had the last floating home. And they were on flat-bottom barges, and they went up and down with the tide, and when the tide was out, they just sat in the mud, and it worked really well, and that's what this one will do. I'm thinking that maybe we should consider something like this for Scotch Pond. Scotch Pond requires dredging to get boats in and out, but it probably wouldn't require that much if you had floating barges in the pond. So that might be another location to consider for it, and to consider other facilities that the city might have as well. I'm a bit concerned right now that they're rebuilding the marsh in front of Scotch Pond, and they may end up filling the hole in the wall slough at the far end, which means the pond will fill up. So this may be a solution to keep the pond useful for something. Anyway, I'm really happy to see it, and look forward to seeing the artists and the activities that will go along with it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair. Well, first of all, just I do support everything on the agenda, and to echo what Councillor Steves just said about the Blue Cabin, I'm pretty excited about that and look forward to seeing it there. I was happy to be part of the community consultation that took place and want to compliment that process and how that took place. So that'll be exciting to have down on the waterfront. The other topic would be the sustainability progress report. We've all talked about that. And
Oh, that's off the consent agenda.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, made a note of that.
In
Thank
due
you.
course.
Thank you very much. Then that's it then. Thanks.
Okay. So with that, we'll call the question on the consent agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. That brings us to, first of all, number 8, which was taken off the consent agenda. Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. My husband has an interest in a business which participated in the temporary patio program this year, so I will excuse myself.
All right. So.
Move the recommendation.
So it's moved and seconded. I should simply explain the temporary patio program. We've had a couple of extensions on this temporary patio program, and the province has kind of set their sights on making some permanent changes in June. And so the idea is that we will extend our temporary outdoor patio program until that time. And there's going to be some changes, and hopefully that will enable many of the operators to apply for permanent status, and they won't have to keep going through this temporary situation. So I'll be certainly supporting it. Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. Yeah, I just had a question of staff on this one. So the province has extended the temporary expanded service area, TESSA, the program, until June 1st of 2022. And I spoke to MLA Kelly Green about this on the weekend, and she was saying that this is just, it's going to be a permanent ability as far as the province is concerned to have extended service on your patio. Can the staff have new bylaws written so that, as a matter of course, people that own businesses can have their patios included in their liquor license application so they don't have to keep reapplying every year?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, it's our understanding that the TSEP program by the Provincial Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch is expiring June 1st, although they're no longer receiving applications after October 31st. The intent is that they would then revert back to the standard liquor application process, so there isn't necessarily a new process instituted by the province. So any operator in Richmond that wishes to expand their service area beyond June 1st can apply through the regular mechanisms.
So it will now be included in the bigger license that for the indoor will be included with the outdoor. So it's one simple application. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, that's correct. A restaurant's capacity is considered in whole, and so an application would be considered in terms of the entire capacity limits of that establishment.
Thank you so much. Very exciting program. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Au.
Yes, Your Worship. I basically support the extension of the program. I support the program in the beginning because that was supposed to be a temporary program to help business because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think as from the report, we can see that it's being well used and welcomed by the business people. And I also support the extension to June 1st, 2022, because I think we are still in the pandemic and we still need to help out business people. However, I think there's a big difference between a temporary program and a permanent program. So that's why I have questions about how we're going to move into the beyond extension and make it permanent. I have a few questions to staff. Now, I know that the staff has consulted with the business sector, and then over 60% of the business who are using the program right now are considering to apply in the future to make it permanent. However, I want to ask staff, do we have any feedback from the public regarding this program? It's successful for a business point of view, but how about for the public? Did we receive complaints from the public such as noise, inconvenience costs, or other things? Or even among business, did we receive any complaints from other business people saying that, oh, there's an unfair competition, or, my next door, right, who got the permission to use the patio has affected my business. So beyond the business people who are using the program right now, what kind of feedback do we get from the public and from other business owners?
Through your worship, to Councillor Au, by developing this program, it was intended as a COVID emergency response measure, and it was implemented in response to demand from the community as stated through industry associations like the Restaurant Association. We did not conduct broad community engagement. So the intent would be, as the temporary program winds down and pending receiving council direction this evening, we would undertake broad community and stakeholder engagement in order to inform our recommendations that we would then bring back to council.
Okay, very good. Yeah, because I remember that at least we received 2 complaints, right? One's about noise, and the other one was about, inconvenience caused to the other users of the space. And I remember that we may have also received a complaint from another business owner. Now, and my other question about the future exploration is that will we take a look at the percentage of indoor capacity as well as outdoor capacity? In a way, I don't want to see that we have a big outdoor patio with a very small indoor space, right? I think this is just turning the things different, in a very different manner. So would that be also one thing we are looking at?
Through your worship, to Councillor Au, in exploring a permanent patio program on public property, it would be limited to the property that's immediately adjacent a restaurant. So, for example, a sidewalk space or an on-street parking. So in that sense, the availability of additional outdoor seating would be limited. And so we would definitely take that into consideration when we report back.
Yeah, because as I said, right, I don't like to see a indoor space very limited, but because of they have a big patio, right, or a big plaza outdoors, right, and then they become a big outdoors restaurant rather than, being a balanced between the indoor and outdoor capacity. On the whole, I'm supporting the whole idea that let's explore into considering how we can make this into a successful project for the future. So I'm supporting both Part A and Part 1 and Part 2 of this motion. Thank you.
Okay, let's call the question. Oh, Councillor Bill McNulty, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to add something to that. The patio, I'm very excited the fact that we have taken the leadership role, and not as a result of COVID, but more importantly, the fact that we continue to support small businesses. They're the mom and pop shops of Richmond and the backbone of it. One of the things I think we have to realize, the patio program is great, but it does not balance what they have lost inside because of COVID and the rules in terms of restaurants inside. So while they get a couple of more seats, 3 or 4 or 5 seats outside, they may have lost 4 or 5 seats inside because of distancing and et cetera. So I think in a way it's a good balance, but more importantly, given where they are, I think the general public are enjoying these. And I think it's something that we should be looking to continue if they wish. And we'll follow the province up to June, and then maybe we can make some decisions on our own after that of how we want to. It has been well received by the community, and if you're in Steveston and you want breakfast at 7:30 in the morning in the sunshine, it's nice to sit out on First Avenue while the sun's in it and enjoying it, as opposed to being inside in certain establishments. So I think it's a good thing. I think we should continue to endorse it, and I thank staff for coming up with a program and providing us with documentation to make it a super successful program. Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Brings us to number 15. Now we're off the consent agenda, the Sustainability Progress Report. This is a General Purposes Committee recommendation. Firstly, that attachment 1 and 2 in the staff report titled Sustainability Progress Report, et cetera, as written on the yellow sheet, be posted on the city's website and highlights be shared to inform the public as described in the report. Secondly, that copies of the above report be forwarded as follows: to Metro Vancouver, to the David Suzuki Blue Dot Program, to local members of the Legislative Assembly and local members of Parliament, and the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change Strategy. And thirdly, that the above report be used to support future grant applications, and I would so move. Okay, so that's moved and seconded. Very briefly, this is a report card. It's well over 100 pages long. It shows the very extensive attention we have paid to sustainability in the environment. Back in the late 90s, we had the State of the Environment report, and that was in 1998, 2001, 2005, and then that evolved to the Sustainability Progress Report, and that's been revised a number of times as well. So it's a very impressive document, and I think it's very well written, and I'd like to thank staff for all the effort that they put into it, because it really does show the very extensive efforts that we are making as a city to lead the region and the province in terms of sustainability. So we'll go to questions and comments. Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting the recommendation on the floor, and I really want to thank staff for this outstanding report, which highlights the key areas and goals to guide the city's efforts to foster a sustainable community enrichment. As the Mayor mentioned, it is a very large report, and the focus areas include climate and energy action, sustainable resource use and waste management, compact, complete communities, mobility and access, green built environment, thriving natural environment, local agriculture and food security, resilient economy, inclusive, accessible and safe community, vibrant and healthy community. There sure is a lot to be proud of, so I'm glad to see that as the next step, staff will communicate highlights of the city's achievements to inform the public, local businesses, institutions, and other stakeholders, as the Mayor outlined. And a question through you, Your Worship, to staff. Now, I believe there was some discussion about, given that the report is so large, about an executive summary. Are we going to be doing that? Is that going to be available?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor McPhail, yes, part of the broader outreach will include more summary documents related to the topics that raised in the report.
Great, thanks very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Following Councillor McPhail, well said. I was just going to say to staff, don't make it too short. You know, Your Worship, when I look at this document that we have here, you know, we look at what the city has done, and you were enunciating back to, you know, pre-1998, and what previous councils and the residents of this city have done to take on climate change and to look at the various issues that have faced them along the way, and how we've been able to add our support and to make things happen in many cases. When we look at, you know, addressing climate change, promoting the circular economy and what have you. The report is there, and it's a master document. It is only a progress report. You know, we can do more and we can do better. We can, let's not stop now, let's be bold, and let's keep moving along in the initiatives that we've started. And go on, that's why I asked you, Your Worship, and Councillor Steeves, what Metro Vancouver's doing. We seem to be ahead and in the forefront, and I think it's important, but we also have to pick up with our brothers and sisters in the other communities to follow along if we're missing something. And when I look at, we get our water report from the workshop, and we got 99.9 something % purity with no turbidity, et cetera, through the the great men and women at the workyard that look after what we've done, I think we can brag about, because 90% of the world doesn't have water. It has hard water. It doesn't have it. So when I look at things we're doing like that, and I won't belabor it because others will want to speak, because the report, I think, speaks for itself. I think we can stand up for once and say, yes, we've done a good job. We have more to do, and it will never be ending. And as you said, Your Worship, it's a report card. I call it. Everything is in progress in there in the 9 chapters that we have. And I'm very happy to see that we're prepared to share it with the various other partners, and especially David Suzuki and the Blue Dot program. I can remember when Councillor Steves and I were at the meeting when they came forward. I forgot who the woman was that spoke to us at the time, but wanted us to sign up, and I don't even think there was a membership fee, and we just said, count us in, because we were one of the first communities to get involved in the Blue Dot program. So again, to thank you to staff. Don't make your summary too short. Let the people know what we've done, and keep up the good work, and keep bringing stuff to us. Thank you.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you. Through the chair, I was so eager to talk about it. Now's the time. But I echo what the comments that were already made, and I won't repeat those. Staff did do a very good job on this. It's very detailed. It's very thorough, even though it's a progress report. The challenge I'd throw out to the public is read it. It's very positive in terms of how it reflects on Richmond. And it just reminded me, I was reading something just yesterday, and I trust that this is right, that worldwide we emit 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and to reverse the effects of climate change, that has to be brought down to 0. So as a world, we have a long way to go. Richmond is off to a good start. So thank you to everybody who contributed to that.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Steves, Harold?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm really pleased with this report. I've been asking for it for, I think I made the referral in 2019 to get this report out there. As Bill said, we were the first in Canada to adopt the Blue Dot program. And to thank us, actually, David Suzuki called a meeting at Terranova to thank us for it. And some of us went to that, and Bill was there. I was there. I'm not sure who else was there, as he personally thanked us for being the first in Canada to adopt the plan. But what's really important to me in this is that I find it really difficult sitting on the Climate Change Committee trying to convince other councils to do some of the things that we're doing and getting nowhere. Now I can go and take this report and take part of it and say, look, this is what we're doing in Richmond. How about you? One of the things that I've been after them to do is look at district energy. And I don't know how long we've been doing district energy, but until just recently, nobody was interested, until we finally approved the North Vancouver sewage plant, and we managed to convince North Van, and this is Metro doing it. It didn't. These things don't necessarily come from the local community, but North Van and Metro Vancouver are now going to have district energy from the sewer plant. Metro Vancouver has also instituted some district energy in Burnaby from the waste plant, the incinerator plant that we've got that's giving wasted energy. They'll be using district energy from that plant to do heating in Burnaby. What I've been trying to get Metro to do is to put together all the good things that each city is doing so we can share the ideas. That hasn't happened. I think they're all embarrassed to do it. And this may embarrass them more, but I think at least we can use this to say, this is what we're doing. How about you joining us? Because to answer the question on clean air and things we were talking about earlier, we're way ahead on the clean air. We don't have that many stoves burning wood in Richmond and things like that. We've gone to electric and natural gas, and now we're cutting out the natural gas, and they're just getting to putting in natural gas when we're getting rid of natural gas. So I think it's a good document, and I certainly intend to use it in the last year that I'm involved in the Climate Change Committee to try and get some of our programs adopted region-wide.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
First of all, I'd like to thank staff for the very comprehensive report. And as being mentioned, this is a very thick report. And I just want to focus my comments and questions on one section, which is number 7, local agriculture and food security. I'm very happy on a few things on this area, in this area. First, we have a very successful food recovery program, and we have secured lots of food from being wasted. I think this is a very good thing. Secondly, we on page 62 of the report, we also have protected our farmland. Staff mentioned that in the last 30 years, basically, we still have the same amount of land in the ALR. And thirdly, I'm very, very delighted that on the next page, page 63, saying that the receipts, farm receipts from 2001 to 2016 has really increased almost by 100%. So it almost doubled, right? Because in 2001, we have farm receipts of $37.6 million. But then, according to the latest number we have, 2016, it became $57.8 million. I'm very happy about that. That means that our farming sector is very vibrant and active, and also producing good results. However, I have a few questions. On the same page, 63, at the top, staff mentioned that 7,014 acres of farmlands are being farmed by 189 farms in 2016. And if I do the math, I think basically we are talking about 56 of the farmlands are being actively cultivated. So I would like to hear staff's comments on this. Is it satisfactory? Should we aim for more? Or how can we help the farming industry, farming sector, right, to make more use and get more land being cultivated? So I think 56 is not good enough. So I'd like to hear staff's comments.
Through your worship to Councillor Au, we are actively working with the farming community and our Food Security and Agriculture Advisory Committee to look at ways to activate farmland that is not being farmed. So we are constantly monitoring it, and through our Farming First strategy, we have a number of strategies to reach out and to look for financial incentives as well for farmers.
Very good. I hope that we can remove any obstacles for preventing people to get into active farming. My second question is about the number of farms. Now, again, I think we have the highest number of farms in 2011 with 211 farms. And then in 2016, we have only 189 farms. So I want to know what is the reason? Are some people giving up farming, or some farms just becoming bigger? They may have taken over other smaller farms. So what is the situation? So why is it that we have the number of farms drop?
Anyone able to help us out on that?
Oh, my apologies. Through your worship, Councillor Au, what I was saying is that you're correct, Councillor Au, in the fact that there's larger farms being created. A lot of the smaller farms are decreasing, and we're seeing larger farms, and that explains the lower number of farms from the last census.
Very good. And my last question is, now when I look at the middle of the page, the main field crops by percentage, I see that there's an overwhelming percentage of 53% on berries, and only 21% on vegetables, and 19% on pasture. So I just want to know, again, do we have, first of all, is it advisable or preferable that we have a more diverse kind of farming? And secondly, if that is more desirable, what are we doing, or what we should do in order to diversify our farming industry?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, the main field crop types, it's kind of a similar percentage over the last several years, but there is a need to also look at diversifying the crops. That's something that we're also actively doing. And part of it, too, is also, I guess, responding to climate change and recognizing the need that we will probably be having to look at different types of farms as as things get warmer. And also there's the salt wedge from the south arm of the Fraser River that will have impacts on farmland, and they have to look at ways to mitigate those impacts. Part of that might be looking at different farm crops, but for now, berries is certainly the dominant crop in Richmond.
Yeah, very good. I hope that in the future we can have more programs to help to diversify the kind of farming we have in Richmond. And I think Councillor Steves and I, when we were talking to the Quannan Polytechnic many years ago, we were hoping that we can have a new kind of urban farming in Richmond. And I think that can be a new direction that we can move into. So with that, I will support the recommendation.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a number of comments on this item. I don't have any questions of staff, and I was hoping to make send this back in general purpose, but I didn't get a seconder, so I'm not going to belabor the point, especially after hearing the comments in support of the report at this stage. I do want to point out a couple things, though. So this is, it was earlier referred to as a report card. I'm very familiar with the report card as a teacher, and I think what's missing here are some key learning outcomes that are not being assessed in this report. And albeit it's a healthy, long report, but there's a lot more that needs to go into it. Otherwise, we risk losing the shifting baseline that is occurring in rapid time. That just thinking of the chapter called Thriving Natural Environment. I feel like I'm someone who's very familiar with the natural environment in Richmond, and there's very little I would say is thriving. I would say it's almost all in steep decline. And if we're not capturing that in this 5-year report, it's not being captured anywhere else. And so this really needed more in that chapter 6 to address that. In the beginning of this report on our council page 211, it says that there's aggressive targets throughout the report. But again, just looking in chapter 6, it feels targetless in my view. I'll just comment on some of the things that have got us to this stage. When we had the State of Environment report in 1998, that became as a citizen in Richmond, one of my lead documents on how to get involved as a citizen. So I picked that up, and at the end of every section where it said, here's what citizens can do, I started to do those things. So I adopted a park that I've maintained for 17 years in Richmond. I've helped to document the biodiversity in Richmond by partnering with the nature park and scientists to document species. Those things are kind of separate reports and really need to be folded in with this. The Blue Dot campaign, which was mentioned earlier, I was a campaigner. I wasn't on council at the time, but I was one of the lead campaigners for that Blue Dot program to get Richmond to be on. So I'm very familiar with it. And one of the guides of the Blue Dot campaign is protecting and restoring biodiversity. And in Richmond, it's in decline. It's going the opposite direction of that. When it comes to the State of the Environment reports of the past and the updated versions, there were sections in there on environmental sensitive areas, and they would state what is happening to them, what are the environmental stressors, what is the good and the bad news in regards, so that we could address what's the bad news and we could promote more of the good news. This report is just showing, here's a couple highlights that we've done, but it doesn't actually give citizens a way to get involved, doesn't give direction for staff to reprioritize ways that we can actually preserve biodiversity. And then the other one mentioned in here is the Richmond Ecological Network Management Strategy, which has a goal number 1 of manage and enhance our ecological assets. And I assure you, just with the last comments, ecological assets are not the priority. The Farming First strategy trumps it. Residential development trumps it. There's very little that actually supports the natural environment in Richmond. Albeit, if you look in chapters 6, page 266 to 274, there are some highlights in there, albeit, but there's lots missing. It doesn't talk about the tree loss. That used to be something reported in the State of the Environment report. What is the tree loss and gain as a result of development? It's not captured in here. we're about to dig up some of the last remnant bog hummocks. So you don't know what that is, but it's the most natural environment in Richmond is moss when it forms these domes naturally. We're about to dig some up to cover them with farm land on the Garden City lands. There's blackberry taking over everywhere in Richmond. That's not listed as one of the major threats. And as a result of that, we're not going to be addressing it for years down the road, and it's going to further erode any potential to create a thriving natural environment in the future. We still don't have an environmental assessment inventory that can be confirmed. It's still all LiDAR satellite map that says, well, this area is dark green, so it must be environmentally sensitive. We haven't even gone into accurately adjust that to say, here is what is ESA, and here's why we need to preserve it, because there's so little, if any, left in many parts of Richmond. There's significant pieces missing, and I'm not going to go on any further because that's why I'm opposed to letting this slip through, and it's shifting the baseline, and it's going to be next to impossible to correct it in the future. So I'm quite disappointed. Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Mayor Brody. Well, as you can hear from Councillor Wolf, there's still much work to be done. But this motion is actually just to post this report on the city's website and highlight this information so the public can become even more engaged. I think if you want to feel good about living in Richmond, read this report. And while I agree with Councillor Wolf, there's always more work to be done. I just wanted to share a couple little tidbits out of this very large report. Water consumption on page 234. In the 17 years reported, our population increased by 46,000 people, but water consumption went down 75 liters per person. That's a really big goal, and part of that was just saving water through water leaks through a really good management program. And on page 239, the Food Mesh program is an incredible success. We spent only $25,000 joining in on this program, and we saved 414,000 kilograms of food, which made 644,000 meals. And there's always a good side when it comes to business. That initiative saved $2.2 million to the businesses and charities who were participating in the program. So I'm really happy that we can put this report on our website and let people read it and see what success looks like, and then let's strive for more.
Okay, I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Those opposed? It is carried with Councillor Wolf opposed. That brings us to the proposed market rental housing program changes and the low-end market rental program updates, and I'll turn it over to Councillor McPhail as chair of the Planning Committee to read it out.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Planning Committee recommendation is number 1, that the low-end market rental contribution rate be increased from 10% to 15% for projects with over 60 dwelling units within the city center area plan, and that the associated Richmond zoning bylaw 8500 amendment bylaw 10297 be introduced and given first reading. Number 2, that the following changes to the low-end market rental cash in lieu rates be approved and reviewed every 2 years for projects with 60 dwelling units or less, and the associated Richmond zoning bylaw 8500 amendment bylaw 10260 be introduced and given first reading. A, $8 per square foot outside of city center and $12 per square foot inside of city center for single-family rezonings. B, $12 per square foot outside of city center and $18 per square foot inside of city center for townhouse developments. And C, $15 per square foot outside of city center and $25 per square foot inside of city center for apartment developments. Number 3, that a mandatory market rental requirement is introduced to secure a minimum of 10% of residential floor area as market rental housing in multi-family projects with more than 60 apartment units, with a cash in lieu option for multi-family projects between 5 and 60 dwelling units, and that the associated Richmond Official Community Plan Bylaw 7100 and Bylaw 9000 Amendment Bylaw 10255 be introduced and given first reading. Number 4, that Richmond Official Community Plan Bylaw 7100 and Bylaw 9000, Amendment Bylaw 10255, having been considered in conjunction with A, the city's financial plan and capital program, and B, the Greater Vancouver Regional District Solid Waste and Liquid Waste Management Plans, is hereby found to be consistent with said city program and plans in accordance with Section 4773A of the Local Government Act. Number 5, that Richmond Official Community Plan Bylaw 7100 and Bylaw 9000, Amendment Bylaw 10255, having been considered in accordance with Section 475 of the Local Government Act and the city's Official Community Plan Bylaw Preparation Consultation Policy 5043, be found not to require further consultation. Number 6, that amendments are made to the zoning bylaw to apply a mandatory market rental requirement to secure market rental housing units in multifamily projects with more than 60 apartment units with an associated density bonus 0.1 floor area ratio, and that the associated Richmond zoning bylaw 8500 amendment bylaw 10298 be introduced and given first reading. Number 7, that in-stream rezoning applications received prior to council's adoption of the proposed recommendations be processed under the existing market rental and low-end market rental policies, provided that the application achieves first reading within 1 year of the adoption of the applicable official community plan or zoning bylaw amendment. Number 8, that staff report back to council regarding key findings related to the implementation of updates to the official community plan market rental housing policy after the program provisions are in place for 2 years. And number 9, that staff be directed to review the feasibility of reducing or waiving development cost charges for purpose-built affordable housing developments with rental rates established below standard low-end market rental rates.
And there's an additional point.
Additional Planning Committee recommendation that the City of Richmond write to Metro Vancouver, the Province of British Columbia, and the federal government advocating for more funding and solutions for affordable housing.
I'll move that. Second. So it's moved and seconded. Did you wish to introduce it? Did you wish to speak to it?
I do have a few comments, Your Worship. Thank you to staff for all the work that has gone into the multiple reports and multiple committee meetings. We know that affordable housing is a vital part of the economic and social infrastructure of a flourishing city and is necessary for attracting and maintaining a diverse workforce that lends itself to the economic development and vitality of a city. Improving the availability of appropriate, affordable, and accessible housing choices for all existing and future residents is a key city goal and regarded as an integral element of creating a livable and appealing city for everyone. A question to you, Your Worship, about the process. Are we going to do this one-on-one, because there's some things that I would like split out, or are we going to ask, how is this going to be done?
My intention was simply to seek comments of the councillors, and if you want to make amendments, we can have those amendments and eventually vote on the whole thing.
Okay. Well, there are some things in this recommendation that I'm struggling with.
Could I interrupt you? Yes. Because I just want to make sure that the public is aware of what we're doing. I just want to go through it very quickly because it was a very long resolution. We have the contribution to affordable housing, the low-end market rental contribution rate for the large complexes over 60 units is now 10%. And the suggestion is that that would go to 15%. For those that are 60 and less, there is a rate which is calculated based on that 10 to 15% that is being proposed. So some adjustments would happen there. Okay. Then in addition to the low-end market rentals, which is the LEMUR program, we also have there would be a mandatory 10% of the various projects would have to be given over to market rentals. Then there's some boilerplate. For those that give the market rentals, there would be a density bonus. Then there's the provision number 7, which talks about the in-stream, how to grandfather the various proposals. And so for market rental and low-end market rental, as long as applications are received prior to adoption of the bylaws, which would in the normal course happen in November for this, as long as those that have applied get their first reading for their various rezonings or changes to the OCP within 1 year, then they are grandfathered at the lower rate. But if they don't meet those criteria, or they apply after this is adopted, then it would be at the higher rate. So then we talk about reviewing it and that sort of thing. Now, in addition to all of that, I think just to set the context of this, we made a motion at planning committee that is it's related, but it has gone directly back to staff. The staff be directed to consider input needed to establish benchmarks to measure and optimize the effectiveness of this low-end market rental program, such as vacancy rates, the use of units by Richmond residents, the adherence to income restrictions, and changes in income and the amount of assets owned by potential occupants. Now, the idea there is that the question has been raised. Is our affordable housing program, is it viable and is it working properly? And to this point, we've been looking to the number of units and really making a fairly logical assumption that if we have a lot of units, then it's working. But this talks about developing criteria to get some benchmarks so we can really fine-tune that, the measure of effectiveness, talking about looking at vacancy rates, how many Richmond residents are we serving instead of just any residents, whether they're adhering to the income restrictions and changes in income and how that's affecting the situation. And the point was made about the assets owned by the potential occupants. If you've got a lot of cash but no assets and no active income, so you're wealthy by any standard, but just not in terms of your income. Can you get into one of these low rent units? So that is something that's being carried out. So I'll go back to you, Madam Chair of Planning Committee, but I just wanted to make sure that before we got into any kind of a discussion, it was kind of ironed out, letting people know overall what we're talking about.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I think that, this has been a very long and good discussion. I think we've had some really good discussions through the 3 planning committee meetings. And I with regards to the low-end market rental contribution, we were at 5% for 10 years. And then we were at 10% for 4 years. So I think going from 10 to 15 in really a relatively short time of getting product online is something that I'm concerned about. I know that in the consultant report, he did recommend a graduated rollout, and he gave his comments that the graduated rollout is recommended specifically because there is a wide range of land values reported by the city's real estate staff, and this would allow time for expectations. A phased-in approach, which was not supported at committee. I did have a question, Your Worship, through you to staff. Now, I don't have a page number. It's in Bylaw 10255. It's on the second page of Bylaw 10255, and it says...
What page is this on?
There's no council page on it. So if you go after page council 353, there's Bylaw 10297, 10260, and 10255, which is, I think, correlates to mandatory rental. On the second page of Bylaw 10255, about a third of the way down, it says, by February 28, 2023, and then every 2 years thereafter, the community amenity contribution rates are to be revised by adding the annual inflation for the preceding 2 calendar years. So my question, Your Worship, because I just want to make sure we're using the same language in all our documents, and I just need my memory refreshed. Is community amenity contribution the same as cash in lieu in this context?
I'll ask staff.
Through Your Worship.
Go ahead.
Yeah, through Your Worship to Councillor McPhail. I would, because of the legislation, we can accept a cash in lieu rate for low-end market rental. For market rental, it's a term called community amenity contribution, which would be similar to, say, public art, community planning amenity contributions. And in those cases, we increase those fees on an annual or every second year through the inflation index. So it would essentially just be increased by average annual inflation, whereas the cash in lieu rates for Lemur would be reviewed looking at construction costs and the value of those Lemur rates. So they are looked at separately.
So they're separate. That's good. Thank you very much. I just wanted to have that clear in my head. I do support number 7, that in-stream rezoning applications received prior to council adoption of the proposed recommendations be processed under the existing market rental and low-end market rental policies. I think process and policy are important. This is a principle that the city has been working under for as long as I've been here. And I believe that the development community needs certainty and predictability and trust in the process. With regards to the additional planning committee recommendation, which I made at planning, thank you to committee for supporting my motion, and I hope that all of council will support it. The City of Richmond's affordable housing strategy recognizes that the city alone cannot adequately address the affordable housing needs of its citizens, and substantial support and cooperation is required from other levels of government, nonprofit organizations, and the development community in order to comprehensively address these needs. I think the discussions that we've been having and the report outlines the work that we have been undertaking and the complexity of the issue. We have been discussing this for many months, and I know that the city is committed to working with partners to leverage resources to support the provision of affordable, safe, and secure affordable housing with appropriate supports along all points of the housing continuum to meet the needs of Richmond residents. And I think we need to remind the other levels of government that this is a shared responsibility. We need to raise awareness of our successes and challenges as well as future opportunities. And I'll stop right now. Thank you, Your Worship.
You, Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. Now, I support affordable housing. I support a lot of this. I think a lot of this makes sense. My concern is that in number 2, I think that we're putting an unfair onus on the smaller the home, the more percentage you're paying, essentially. So, for example, at $25 a square foot, you got a 1,000 square foot place, you got a $900,000 condo, say, you're paying 3% of that value. But if you have a single family house, you've got about 1.4% of your house is tied up in that. So if we want someone in city center to not subdivide the land and build 2 houses where one house was. We want them to do a land assembly. We want to build more housing. We want more density. But instead, we're sort of unfairly putting it on, you know, your actual new family that's trying to buy their first apartment or their first townhouse. I think you're putting more onus on them. Now, I have a question to staff, because my understanding is if you subdivided a property, you had to build 2 homes on that subdivided property, and if you put a suite in each property, then you don't have to pay the affordable housing Is that correct? Or are we taking this away in this situation? Or did it change?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, I might hand this over to either Mr. Spencer or Ms. Smith.
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, yes, that's correct. For rezonings that,
Is that correct?
yes.
Okay, so if I take a house in city center and I subdivide it into 2 homes and I put a suite in them, so now that person, they've got a nice house, they can rent out that suite, but they don't actually have to put anything into this affordable housing. Is that what you're saying?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, yes, applicants who are seeking a rezoning for a single detached property have the option of either providing 2 secondary suites or 1 secondary suite and 1 cash in lieu contribution, or 2 cash in lieu contributions.
Okay, so that's where my sort of concern for this was, is like, if you can afford, this $2 million house in city center, and you don't have to pay anything into this, but you're buying your very first condo downtown, and you're gonna have to pay close to $25,000 into this affordable housing. It's essentially your share of this. And so my feeling is we're not evenly distributing how we're doing this. And I think it's fair to make it even for these people. If you can afford a house in city center after you've done a rezoning, then I think you should have a bigger share of this payment into the affordable housing. And that's one of the reasons I was against this. Now, we've also heard from realtors that large parcels are now being ignored. So, so in item number 3, we're finding some of these large developers, they've either put their project on hold for whatever their reason is. We're seeing things sort of change here, but so we're looking right now at putting the mandatory 10% on, but we still haven't heard back on this report on the rental tenure, right? And so, I know I've certainly heard Councillor Steves talk about it a number of times. We've heard a few other people about how we might use this as a carrot versus a stick, right? So, we rezone an area to rental tenure in an upzoning. So we give it more density, we create more possibility for people to put more housing on it, to bring some housing. And it doesn't necessarily have to then be in city center, right? It could be in other areas, like say closer to some of our schools that are less full than others. And so we could actually be making better use of the infrastructure that we already have, the schools and those kind of things. And so, maybe before we start putting this mandatory 10%, I think it makes more sense to wait this rental tenure answer and see what's happening. We've already heard that in some cases, some of the developers are already giving us the 10%, or we are seeing, positive action on our rental rules anyway. So I think it might be premature to put this tack this 10% mandatory on, especially when it also tacks on extra dollar value on the smaller properties. So once again, you're hitting those first-time condo buyers that are trying to get into the market. They're trying to get that first one. They've got their brand new baby. They're trying to get everything happening. They're trying to get into the property ladder, and they're just being squeezed a little bit further out of it. We look at Burnaby and Coquitlam, and they have these huge projects with 500 purpose-built rentals coming into them because they have more land to work with. But they're also doing it on, they're putting the carrots out there. They're getting pools, they're getting parks, they're getting the things that they want. I think we want to look at the things that we want, and it's not just rental, it's also schools and pools and fields and parks. So, I think hanging tight on the mandatory market rental until we really figure out the options of how to really use the carrot on this rental tenure program is worth waiting for.
Are you looking to make a motion of some sort?
Well, I would like to, I'd like to request that we take each one at a time so that we could refer one back. We could suggest that we relook
Listen,
at.
if you want a referral, say so.
I'd like to refer back number 2 to relook at it and to include single-family homes.
Just a minute, I'm not going to take the referral now. I just want to know whether you want to refer something.
Yeah.
So
I'd
you're
like to
talking
refer- I'd like
referral
to-
on number 2 and 3?
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Okay, Councillor McNulty.
Your worship, it's going to be an interesting night. I do have a couple of questions before I start. I'll follow up on that. I believe we need to discuss and deal with each one and not deal with the whole package, because there's some strengths in there and there's some weaknesses, and I think we need to do it. But it'd be my comment. Could I get
Well, just a minute, let me address that. You can address every single point you want, and you can make whatever amendments you see fit, or deletions, or whatever, and then we vote on it all. It's all interrelated.
Fine. Well, there are a lot, well, we can discuss that other time. That's your request. I think we can pass.
That's my
things.
ruling.
Pardon?
That's my ruling.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to that. We'll challenge that, because I think that there makes some common sense here. I think we've got a long ways to go tonight on something that's probably extremely pivotal for us to deal with. Could I get a definition before I go on what is the city center area that we are talking about? To me, the city center is from Sea Island Way south to Blundell, from Gilbert to Garden City. To me, that is the city center. Am I correct on that?
Your worship, to Council McNulty, yes, you are correct. The city center area plan is defined in the area plan portion of our official community plan.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. I guess my question when I look at this, we have to separate a couple things out from the buyers versus the renters. This was supposed to be to help us with low income and market rental. And I think it's important. We want affordability, accessibility, and attainability for renters. On it, let's figure out how we're going to do it. But I have a question here. In some cases, have we gone far enough, and have we paved the way to see that the existing program is working and how we can better the other? And I have some questions. On the first one, I believe we need to go to 15%. At City Center a number of months ago, for the City Center development, it was 17.9% when you worked it out. When we did the little development along Railway, which was supposed to be 5%, it ends up at 15%. So I think we have to move to 15%. How we do it is the question that I have. And I believe we should phase it in. If committee's not prepared to go, you go 12.5% this year, 15% the year after, and we get to 15% if it's too much. As opposed, I believe we need to put number one in now with some sort of increase. That's just a personal opinion and reading this. And I think that as Mr. Mulholland, the Rollo report said, we gradually roll it out. Okay, I'd rather get something and moving it along than get nothing, because we need those units now for rental. We are in a rental crisis in the whole Lower Mainland. Councillor Steves and Councillor Mayor Malcolm Brody will know that we're looking at 30,000 apartments over the next 10 years in the Lower Mainland, when 1.5 to 2 million people move into the Lower Mainland, into our 20-something. So Richmond needs to have its share now. So I strongly urge the committee or council tonight to at least try to put something in, and we can have a separate bylaw if we have to on that one. On number two, some of the increases are, again, massive, and all of a sudden come on. I think there is an opportunity to phase them in as well if council is willing to do so, because it's where we want to be. And obviously from some of the discussion I'm hearing, there's not going to be too much palatability for what I see on the floor now. And obviously the mandatory market rental, forcing people to do market rental, that needs, in my opinion, more examination on it, Your Worship. One of the things that I have, and I've said this before, and it was not in the report, and that was incentives for rental. The incentives are not there. Giving 0.1 in floor area is not enough. The density doesn't cover the cost of what we're doing. And I think the one thing that we have to give away, and that is density. And if we're getting X number of units that will benefit us and get them so that people can rent them, then I have no problem giving a little bit of extra density, seeing a little bit of extra density coming. One of the things in the city center and that I have tremendous concern about, we discussed this at committee, and that's the parking requirement ratios. The people who need to get out and use public transit. You know, we're building next to the SkyTrain, and you know how hard people work to get the SkyTrain here. And we're gonna add, I believe, Your Worship, you're on transit, we're gonna add an extra car, we're gonna add to the stations, we're gonna make it more passenger friendly, and we've got to, maybe we cut back on the parking requirements so that you're only allowed one car if you live in the city center, and or you find a place to park it in a garage or whatever, and we get people on buses and trains. So I think that aspect, I'd like to re-examine 6 when it comes to the floor. Having got input from, we did get a letter from the Richmond Home Builders Group to, I guess it's hello to Mr. Spencer, talking about community contribution, densest bonusing. They say density bonusing for El Lemur is not enough to make it worthwhile for small developers to include such rental housing in these projects. And they're the backbone. These are the backbone of our community and have been here for a while, and we need to look at those and need to have additional density. And they also say parking requirements should be reduced and a reduction on DCC for market rental and LMR. So these are some things that have to come into it, Your Worship, and we'll see how each of these go. I believe we need to leave tonight with something on the table, as opposed to sending everything back. And if we do, we need to, I would like to move down the road that we phase these in. We take something tonight, like I said, and I'll go back to number 1. If we don't get 15% tonight, let's get 12.5 tonight and move to 15 next year. If we don't get $8 a square foot, let's get 10 and let's get 12 next year. You know, break it down so that people can see it, so that at the end we have our policy on the table. I've had a lot of discussion with a lot of people, and I want to support our policy changes, but I think there needs to be some fine tuning and some opportunity for us to make it work. We need the units. There's no, and I'm not saying we discuss, measure everything in units. Let's put people in homes. And a home could be a rental. Let's put people in it. If we're looking for people to buy a house, that's a separate thing. I look at its proposed market rental policy, and low-end market rental is what's on the table tonight. And I'm hoping that some of the issues that have been brought up so far and have been alluded to, that we can address them. Because whatever we do, especially in buying, no matter what we put down, it will always be passed on to the consumer. But let's get some rental so that people can stay here. Let's get our hospital worker living in Richmond, a block or two or a half a mile away from the hospital, instead of coming out from Cloverdale and Langley, etc., or our servers at White Spot that come in from beyond Langley to work. I think it's important. So this is the kind of thing we got. I'd like to see dedicated rental, which are for service workers and people that work in our first responders, especially, so they can live here and continue their applications here. So I'll stop at that, wait for other discussion and hear Your Worship, but then I want to make a couple of motions to not to refer, but to proceed. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have, I think, 4 questions to staff. So I attended the planning committee meeting, so I heard all the discussion. I would have made some amendments if I was on the committee, so I may, based on staff's response, make a few amendments tonight, especially to item number 9. My first question, probably the simplest one for staff, on item number 1, if we were to move it up to 15%, is that a hard cap at 15%, or could a developer put it to 20% at their own doing?
Your Worship, perhaps I can take that one. No, the 15% should be considered the floor, not the ceiling. So we have had developments in the past based on development-specific circumstances that have exceeded the requirement, and that continues to be an option.
Great, thank you. Then just to follow up on that one, I like that analogy, the floor, the ceiling there, and to help to promote that fact that when we are in discussions that hey, there are some incentives to help get you above that 15%. So that's great. That staff will continue on that. My next question goes through item number 9. A little bit, I guess, unclear. I'm looking at our status of open referral document, and in there's a market rental policy that I believe is the one that was referred to at the planning committee and is coming back in November. Under that market rental policy, there's just a single line, which is what I want to address here, and how it fits to item number 9. So it says that staff will provide suggestions and options for market rental policy and report back. So, and then I look at item 9 here in front of us on our council page 9, and it talks about incentives, development cost charges for purpose-built affordable housing developments. So if I could just get clarification, first part, are all of these the exact same thing? Purpose-built affordable housing development, purpose-built rental, and rental tenure zoning. Are we talking about the same thing in all those cases?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Wolf, no, we're not talking about the same thing in all of those cases. There is a referral on rental tenure zoning. It is not directly related to what you've got on the table tonight. The city does already use rental tenure zoning for new developments. We use it to secure the LEMA and rental units when they're negotiated and approved. The aspect in the referral relates to, there are 60 pure rental, historic rental sites in the city of Richmond, and the issue is whether the city is willing to apply rental tenure zoning to those historic rental-only sites in order to better ensure that they can't be redeveloped for market condos in the future. So that the rental tenure zoning referral refers to different properties to the policies that you have on the table tonight. And they are intended, you're dealing with a different issue. You're talking about the protection of existing rental sites, historic rental sites, rather than securing LEMA and market rental units in development sites.
I really appreciate that. That clarifies it. My next question through the chair to staff, again on that item. So taking then the Spires Road area within the city centre, my thought here of making an amendment would be that we identify that area as a future, I think I'm using the right phrase, purpose-built rental area. Maybe I'm using the wrong phrase again. So that when new developments go in that block, they become that, they go along with the 60 pure rental sites that we already have, but this would be maybe a much larger one than those other 60 sites. To address what Councillor McNulty was pointing out, finding places for our service workers to have a place. This is in city centre, it's close to a lot of transit. Is that already something that staff are doing, or because I know we've had a few developments come forward or developments in that area, and I don't see them as being only rental. I've seen them come up as condo for sale. So my thought here is that we make an amendment to identify Spire's area for exclusive rentals. Does that make sense at this stage, or is that not part of this item 9?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, I would suggest that it's not appropriate to do that as part of this initiative. And regarding the Spires area, we have a referral. In fact, I think we've had it sent back to staff a couple of times. But we have a referral for to review the area plan in that area. We are planning to bring that report back to Planning Committee within a month. And within that report, we do identify policy that would allow the council to provide bonus density for rental projects and for adding rental units into projects. So I would suggest that the best time to have a discussion about whether Spires would be rental only is when the area plan for Spires comes forward and not tonight.
Okay, thank you. That clears that one up very much. My second question, or third question perhaps through the chair to the staff, also related to this number 9. I think maybe this one fits more than the other one. Could we, do we need an amendment or not to ask staff to create a sliding scale for DCCs? Like, is it already built into what it says in here, where when it review the feasibility of reducing or waiving? Can we just develop a sliding scale so that there is a clear distinction that when you build a certain percentage, you're going to get a certain incentive?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I think that is implicit in the wording that you have before you. We can certainly look at that sort of an approach as part of the options. In particular, what number 9 is looking to home in on is considering waiving DCCs only for projects that would provide rents well below a market rent. Because, of course, when you waive DCCs, you have to find the money from elsewhere, usually general revenue, general tax revenue. And so you want to make sure that you're getting the best return that you can for waiving those fees to a developer. And staff are suggesting in 9, and if we're directed, we'll look at it further, that we should target those potential reductions of DCCs to developments that rent below market.
Great, I look forward to that then. And then my last question is, again, I think it fits here. This is the largest item we've had that mentions market rental and low-end market rental. So, and the mayor would like to correct me on this if it doesn't fit here, but to identify, to have direction for staff, and maybe this is, staff already feel this, they've been directed this way, for a development like Polygon Talisman, which has come before us and is now sent back and is being revised. Could staff, or are staff already working with that developer to develop a municipal revitalization tax exemption where they can delay the value added to the property? Because we're talking about an area that's grass, hay fields, and not an area with housing. So if they were to uplift that land value and then put in exclusive market rental and low-end market rental to get that revitalization tax exemption, does that fit in this item today? Could it be an item number 10?
Your Worship, perhaps I can tackle that one too, to Councillor Wolf. Staff are currently in negotiations with Polygon regarding that project. Of course, it's a separate referral to what you have on the table tonight. I feel that we are making decent progress in terms of increasing the amount of LEMA and market rental in that project. It remains to be seen how far we can drive that, but we will be bringing that development back to committee and council, I would guess within the next 2 months. And I think that if it doesn't meet council's expectations at that time, certainly you could give us direction at that time to explore it in whatever way you feel is appropriate. But I really don't feel that the details of the Polygon project are part of the package on the table tonight.
Thank you, much appreciated. No more questions. My last comment is I would actually feel comfortable having all of these together in our vote and not separate them out, because I see the connection that they have together. Thank you.
Councillor Steves.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Like Councillor Wolf on the sustainability report, he was concerned that it didn't go far enough. I'm concerned that this report doesn't go far enough. However, we have a problem, and I'm really disturbed by what I'm hearing tonight. Everybody wants to refer it back for this, that, or the next thing. Every time we refer it back, we lose more affordable housing units as more and more companies come in and get their approvals under the old rules. So for God's sake, tonight, let's get it passed. We can amend it later. And I guess I'm pleading with you, because that's what's been happening. Polygon could have been dealt with a long time ago. Now we're going to have to argue with Polygon and increase the units, because we should have done this a year or two ago. The developments that are grandfathered will simply increase every time we refer it back. The other thing I have a problem with is on the news tonight, in Metro Vancouver, housing prices went up 14% in the past year. These grandfathered developments and all the ones that are coming forward now have already had an increase of 14% in value. And we're talking around here, let's not take it out. Let's let them have it and reduce the amount of affordable housing, and whether it's rental or affordable housing, reduce it and phase it in. They are not phasing in the increased prices they're charging for their units if they're going up 14% in 1 year in the middle of a COVID pandemic. And finally, my criticism of the whole thing at committee was that this is only a part of the solution, and we need to be looking at densifying more density on arterial roads, Railway Avenue, even in residential areas. But that doesn't come with this report. We're dealing this specifically with a downtown core and an urgent need to get affordable and rental housing there. These other things can come later, so I'm hoping Council will pass it without amendment and we'll get on with the job.
In conjunction with those remarks, I'll just mention that if something's not perfect enough for somebody, we can always pass what we've got and have it reviewed and bring in subsequent tweaks if that's what is required. But I think it's consistent with what Councillor Steves is saying. Councillor Au.
Yes, Your Worship, I'm in agreement with staff in general direction that they are recommending, and also I can support most of the recommendations they made in the motion. However, I have questions and reservations on recommendation 3 and 6. Actually, they are related. They are on the topic of market rental. My first question is, actually I raised this question before, but I raised it again because I did not get the answer. Why is a sliding scale proportionate to the size of the project not being recommended or even considered? I've mentioned before that due to economy scale, a 100-unit project is different from a 1,000-unit project. And to take 10% out of 100 units is different from taking 100 units out of a 1,000-unit project in terms of the cost to the developer, to the buyers of the strata units, and also in terms of management. So why is this sliding scale approach not being considered?
Through your worship to Councillor Al, perhaps I can respond to that. In a sense, you could argue that, in fact, there is a sliding scale in the existing policy and even in what is being recommended. For many years, we have used a percentage of gross floor area, partly so that it's more difficult to play games with the math. If you go with a percentage of units, you can fiddle with the unit size so that a smaller percentage of floor area is part of your Lima contribution. So by going with a percentage of the gross floor area, in effect it does slide because the larger projects provide you with a larger absolute floor area contribution, while the smaller projects provide less square feet in terms of the Lima housing. Also, the threshold for the cash in lieu is intended to treat, again, smaller projects differently to larger projects, recognizing that in most cases the smaller projects have more challenges. So, I would suggest that there is a bit of a sliding scale philosophy already in the policy and in the proposed amendments. Certainly, if this were to pass and if council were wanting us to look at that some more to further embed that principle, we could do that with direction from council.
Okay. And to follow up on that, I argue that due to the economic scale, I think the impact and also the implication are different between the size of the projects. And you also just mentioned that the smaller projects might have more challenges. And this is related to 6. Now, if we are talking about smaller projects, even if we have this flat rate of 10%, would it be more difficult for smaller projects to make benefits or full benefits of the recommendation number 6, which is the density bonus, due to the small size of the land, the shape, or whatever? So in other words, if they cannot take the full use of or the full benefit of item 6, probably it would make it more difficult for smaller projects to sustain a 10% contribution, mandatory contribution. Is it not the case?
Through your worship to Councillor Al, yes, I think that is the case. The smaller projects sometimes struggle to make it work. Also, when it comes to units, you don't necessarily want, small developments to give you one unit at a time. It's a management nightmare. Exactly. So again, for the smaller projects, because of course item number 6 is referring to mandatory market rental, the option has been recommended again for the smaller projects to have a cash in lieu of unit contribution to assist their flexibility and their viability. I think that 0.1 FAR, again, I guess that I used the term earlier, it's a floor, not a ceiling. And we have many projects where the sites can carry more density. We work through that with the developer, with the designers, and we brought many projects to council that have a lot more density than the 0.1, where it works and where it makes sense on the site. And we would deal with that through the rezoning process. So I think you should consider the 0.1 density bonus as an absolute minimum, and it would go up from there depending on the site suitability.
Well, I still believe that we should consider the sliding scale approach, and I would like to see that we can have further, exploration in building up different business models to see how feasible it is to use the sliding scale approach. And my second question, similar but different. Now, if we cannot or we do not wish to consider the sliding scale approach, what if we increase the threshold for the mandatory contribution. For example, instead of making it 60 units as a threshold, can we make it higher in, say, for example, maybe into 100 units as a threshold, but we also increase the percentage. Staff is now recommending a flat rate of 10%. But if we increase the threshold from 60 units to, say, 120 or 100, but at the same time, we increase the number of units to 15%. My argument, as I already been pointed out, that if we have a 60 unit project, and then we got 6 units out of the project, it would be very difficult for small developers to manage these 6 rental units. Because I think the business model for many of the small businesses that they build and then they sell and then they move on to another project. To maintain a rental section in these 60 units would be difficult for them. And also they might have the expertise or the extra cost would be detrimental. So in other words, if we raise the threshold, so only bigger projects would have to make this mandatory contribution. But at the same time, we are not losing anything because, I'm also suggesting that perhaps we'll make it into 15% instead of 10. And with the larger number of units in one project, it might make it more economically feasible for a larger developer to have a rental department to take care of those rental units. So again, my question is, can it be considered that we increase the threshold as well as the number of, the percentage as a requirement?
Through the chair to Councillor Al, the short answer is yes, it could be considered. This is a very complex package with lots of different facets to it, and there are almost an infinite number of permutations for the various, elements. So the answer is yes, certainly we could look at that, but I would again suggest that it's time to kind of put down a marker in terms of the policy, and then if there's a concern about whether 60 is the right number, then a referral to council to examine that would be a good approach. I do recall that the threshold used to be 80 units. It was brought down to 60. The only thing I would say, though, about market rental is that managing 6 units is quite feasible because it's market rental, so you don't have all of the checks that have to be done for LIMA, income levels, etc. So, but certainly we could take a direction to review that further.
Your Worship, if this is appropriate, I would like to make a referral motion.
Not now.
Not now, yeah, I understand.
Councillor Hobbs.
Oh, thank you, and through the chair. Well, first of all, I haven't been to all the meetings because I haven't been here that long, but I've been to a few. And thank you, staff, for giving me something to read over the last week for every hour of the day. But I do share many of the concerns and comments that have been made earlier. I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind that staff and everybody on council shares the similar concerns about affordable housing, attainable housing, low-end market rental. So, and I do have some questions I will get to, Your Worship. But for me, it's the policies that will create the opportunities for young people, for old people, for single parents, for people with disabilities. I know there's a whole identifiable group or different groups that are identified in the policy. So I don't doubt at all that everybody's trying to get to that goal. It's a matter of how do we get there. And it's not just about renting, it's also about owning or somebody purchasing their first home. And that applies to people who moved here 6 months ago or people that were born and raised here. They face similar challenges. And one other thought I had as people talked, and then I'll get into a couple questions, is that we talk about service workers and people perhaps that are at the lower socioeconomic end of the scale in terms of their income, but it's extremely difficult even for people who are well paid to purchase their first home or to rent in certain areas or in certain buildings, you could be talking about people that earn $100,000 a year. And for instance, in a low-end market rental, you might be talking about one income with a family, and they might not qualify for low-end market rental because they might be over the threshold that I believe is in the 60s. Anyway, couple questions. How many other cities and jurisdictions in Metro Vancouver, the 21 or so jurisdictions, have a lemur policy, anything similar to Richmond? And that is like with hard numbers, 5%, 10%, and now we're talking 15%. Who has that? And the second part of it is, if anybody has implemented it lately, who, well, just start with that, please.
Through the chair, perhaps I can tackle that. I think nobody has the depth of history that Richmond has with the LEMA policy and the consistency through all development. But a number of municipalities have more recently adopted low-end market rental requirements. Now, some are sort of across the board, the way that the Richmond policy is, and others are kind of hit and miss. They hit some of the big developments, but take a miss on a whole bunch of the smaller ones. So there's no question in my mind that Richmond has been a leader in the area, and but based on the referrals and the analysis that we have done, there is the ability to raise the bar and not affect development.
Sure, and I do appreciate the fact that this is all the result of a referral from council, so thank you for that again. Now, considering nobody really has the policy, I mean, it's good to be a leader, and Richmond is a leader in this, there's no doubt about it, and I believe it's a good thing, similar to the sustainability report that we talked about. But the thing about leading is it's always important when you're a leader and going over the trenches, so to speak, that there are people following you. So we are in a marketplace that is competitive, and investment dollars are fluid and can go other places. So in comparison to other cities and jurisdictions, is there anybody that is, especially on a per capita basis, but even in absolute numbers, is there any other city that comes close to us in what we provided in the different modes of housing, lemur, market rental, affordable housing, things like stories and that type of thing? Are we number one? Are we doing well? And are we leading in terms of numbers?
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, perhaps I can take a lead on that. I think when we began the affordable housing strategy in 2007, we were definitely leaders at that point. We were the first municipality to have a citywide lemur program, and we still are a leader with respect to that program, in that all developers pay into that or make a contribution or provide built low-end market rental. What we found in the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years, is that the market per market rental has become a bit more lucrative, and certainly other municipalities are catching up, focusing on certain city center areas. I would say that Vancouver, New Westminster, and the city of North Vancouver have really raised the bar recently. And but like I say, they focus on sort of key areas within their municipalities. And those are areas that we do need to catch up a bit, and that's the reason why we have this report in front of you today.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple more questions, Worship. So if 15% is the new one, if it's passed tonight, what I'd like to know is, when I read this, and I am new to it, so it did seem to me to be a lot of stick and not much carrot. Now, why is it that we don't talk in this report about things that people have talked about tonight, like increasing some of the density bonus or reducing parking? Where is the incentive in this? Because as I've heard staff say, the problem in Richmond in terms of construction, one of the problems is you can't dig down and you can't just build up forever like they can in Burnaby because of the airport. So where are our carrots?
Perhaps I can tackle that one through your worship. I think that for the market rental component, clearly there are incentives in terms of opportunities to reduce parking and increase density. And albeit initially in a limited way, subject to, with increased density bonusing based on a site-specific assessment. the report doesn't talk about the incentives or the foundation for the LEMA, perhaps to the extent that it could, because the whole LEMA program is based on a base density / bonus density type of inclusionary zoning. So it put in plain language, with the LEMA policy in place, if a developer were to refuse to participate in the LEMA program, then quite possibly council could refuse to reject the rezoning, refuse rezoning on the property. And even if the property was zoned and a developer didn't want to participate in the LEMA program, then their density entitlement would be severely curtailed. So instead of a density of 3, they'd be looking at a density of less than 1 FAR. So the density bonus, if you will, for LEMA is already ingrained, and it has been for over a decade. It's the foundation of the LEMA program, and there's no need to revisit it because it's a proven thing and it works. And but having said that, particularly for a new member of council, perhaps it would have been useful if we had, spent a little bit more time on that.
Well, thank you for that. Just, in this whole package and reading it, sometimes it's hard to tell what the cause and effect is, or, the chicken and the egg, for instance. And when I read it, it did occur to me that one thing is clear, to get more market rental, to get more LEMA, to get more affordable housing, to get more market housing or market rental in terms of condos, you have to have the environment that creates development. Because without that, you're not going to have 15% LEMA, because 15% of nothing obviously is nothing, or a lower percentage. So having said that, and notwithstanding the economic analysis that's been referred to many times, is there anything that concerns you about an overstressed market or competition in Metro Vancouver that we might be putting ourselves at a disadvantage with, in particular, the 15%? Anyway, could you just comment on that? Because it is competitive in my mind in Metro Vancouver.
Perhaps I'll tackle that through your worship to Councillor Hobbs. There's nothing that keeps me awake at night about what we've recommended to you. The economic analysis is key. All of it indicates that what we recommended to you can be done without driving away development or having any significant financial impact on. Well, it will have a financial impact on a developer in that it will increase costs for them, but it will not change market pricing of housing in Richmond. What it will do is most likely reduce the developer's profit on projects. So there's nothing that keeps me awake at night. And frankly, if I had $1 for every time I've been told that when we introduce new requirements, the world would end and development would run, I probably wouldn't need to work for a living anymore. So.
Okay, thanks. Just a couple more, is that okay? How do you measure the, other than in units, which is an obvious number, how else would you measure the success of the 10% LEMA starting in 2017? Taking into account COVID, maybe that might have had an impact, I don't know. Is there any other way to measure it other than just units?
Yeah, that's the referral that was made from Planning Committee talking about benchmarks. So staff has the referral to work up the benchmarks.
Okay.
To say more than just units, a number of other criteria.
Okay, one more question, I think.
Sure.
One, Your Worship, thank you. Well, you just mentioned it actually, the increased cost per unit with going to 15% for the homes that are sold through the market. And you maintain that you don't think that this would increase the cost of a individual unit being sold in the marketplace?
Through your worship, Councillor Hobbs, I take it that was a question. No, the way that the market prices residential product is what the market will bear at the time of the transaction. So no, it won't directly change the market cost of housing in Richmond, because you have to keep in mind that developers that are selling units in Richmond have to remain competitive with elsewhere, otherwise people will just buy elsewhere. So in and of itself, it will not increase the market price of housing. What it will do is it will increase the cost of development to the developer, but not to the point where it will threaten the viability of development in Richmond. And Mr. Mulholland is here, and he's far more expert than I am in this area, but most likely, if you introduce this additional cost to developers, they will simply be prepared to pay less for things like raw land. But no, we don't expect it's going to affect the market price of housing in Richmond, and nor do I expect that it will affect development within Richmond vis-a-vis other municipalities.
Okay, perhaps just one more then.
One more quick one.
The income level for Lemur, I believe, is in the 60,000 range, right? I forget the number off the top of my head. When does that get reviewed and updated? What basis? And because just as an example, you could have somebody who's a single parent, maybe a teacher with 2 kids, and after about 4 years, I'm sure they wouldn't qualify at that level, or some other job. How does that get set, and how often does the income get reviewed?
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, the income range for the Lemur program is roughly about 37,000 to 68,000 per year, depending on the bedroom size of the unit. The current rental rates were established along with the affordable housing strategy in 2018 and are scheduled to be reviewed every 2 years. However, due to COVID, staff did not review the rental rates in 2020, but we'll do so shortly in 2022.
Great, thank you. That's it for Lemur.
Okay, Councillor Day.
Brody, and you'll be happy to hear I don't have any questions. I think they've all been answered. We have done our due diligence, and as Councillor Steves says, let's get on with it. We are in a crisis situation, and the escalating land costs no one could have possibly have imagined. No one here on council is a planner, but our staff members are certified professionals, and I'm not willing to slow down this process tonight. I think we need to allow staff to do their job, and as they stated in number 9 and number 8, review this in due course. So staff have created a sliding scale, and it's not necessary to tweak it, because for smaller projects, as my dad would say, buy your way out of the problem. I would encourage council to trust the hard work of staff and Rollo Associates. And if we go to page CNCL 341, Rollo and Associates, who we hired to study this entire option, clearly stated that 15% was determined to be appropriate for a wide range of developments inside the city center. And they also contradict what a number of councillors have said here tonight. They advise that the proposed clearly defined policy and program amendments would not increase sale prices for home buyers. They're the professionals. We are not. We're just the ones that have to make the decision. So just like the environmental sustainability improvements that we just did recently, a few minutes or an hour ago, we're not going to be able to fix all the problems tonight, but we're going to get a really good start on it, and we're going to make a fundamental difference in people's lives. This affordable housing crisis has been going on for a long time, and we need to step up. And as staff pointed out earlier, that when it comes to rental, Vancouver, New Westminster, North Vancouver are all ahead of us. We've fallen behind. Now, it's clearly defined in the policy. Oh, yes, and yes, Rollo and Associates say that the key here is to have clearly defined policy and program amendments. That's what we're trying to do. So let's stick to the facts. We are doing it right. As staff also pointed out, this is the floor, not the ceiling. And this is a good start, but many developers will come forward with more affordable housing, and I think that we need to get on with it. And the one thing that staff said is, let's put down a marker. Let's make the decision today to do what we know needs to be done and not drag this out any longer. There are too many developments that are going to slip through the cracks. And staff also mentioned that there is already market rental incentives, and the density bonus has been in place for over a decade. We can't move forward until we make this decision. I would encourage councillors to consider approving this as written so that we can move forward, and then let's look at the reviews when they come forward from staff. I have no questions. Thank you, Mayor Brody.
Okay. What I propose to do is this. There's been various comments about the Lemur contribution rates, whether it's units as in number 1 or cash in lieu as in number 2, and the grandfather provisions in number 7. So I think that we should discuss that and see if there's any amendments or deletions or proposals with respect to those 3. Then, once we've done the Lemur, then I think we should talk about the rental. We've got number 3 talks about rental requirements. Number 6 talks about the density bonus, and number 7 talks about the grandfathering for rental, as it did for Lemur. So my suggestion is that we'll do that in those 2 main sections, and entertain, and we'll have motions to delete, to amend, to whatever you want in those areas, okay? So my suggestion is I'll ask for, on Lemur, okay, now Lemur is number 1 is the contribution rates. Now related to those contribution rates is number 2 for the cash for the smaller developments, call it 60 and below, single-family townhouse apartment developments. Okay? So those 2 are related, and then number 7 talks about grandfathering. So the main thing I've heard is that some people want to phase in the 10 to 15% and the provisions of number 2. I'm not advocating that, I'm just saying that's what I've heard. So I think we should decide on that if we want to phase it in, and then we'll go to the grandfathering of that. Is that phased? If we decide we want to phase it in, then we have the grandfathering phased in. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Councillor McNulty, you have a quizzical look on your face.
So we're going to deal with 1, 2, and 7 to start with?
To start. Okay? And then 3, 6, and 7 in the context of rental. Okay? So for Lemur, it says going 10 to 15%. We've got the cash in lieu. Does anybody have any ideas about that? If you could raise your hand electronically there if you want to speak. I think that was that, who was that? Councillor Steves, was that you?
Yeah, can we move the motion and then somebody amends it, or just, I'd like to move the motion as is.
It is on the floor. It was moved right at the beginning.
Floor, okay.
So we're making amendments to it. Okay, so okay, Councillor Liu.
Thank you. I would move that in item number 2, that we treat townhomes the same as single-family homes, and if they have a micro suite in them, they should be afforded the same rule of.
No, that's out. It's been told that's outside what we're talking about here.
Okay, well, I'd like to refer it back to make single-family homes and multifamily homes more equitable.
you don't want to pass something and have that as a referral to see if that should be tweaked.
Okay, I can pass it. Yeah, I'm happy to tweak it after.
Okay, so just hold on to that thought and we'll come back to you, or you'll remind me. Who else? Is anybody, okay, Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to propose number 1 and 2 that we phase in over 2 years.
Now, just a minute. I just wanted to define that because what I hear you say, you tell me if the percentages are wrong, but you wanted to go from right now, subject to grandfather, you go to 12 and a half. A year from now, you go to 15. And you would do the same with number 2, which are related rates, cash in lieu for smaller places. And let's see where that goes, and then we can talk about grandfathering, okay? So the motion is to amend to phase in 1 and 2. Is that seconded? It's seconded. Okay, so that is seconded. Did you wish to speak to your amendment?
I'd like to say that I appreciate the conversation that we've had. I believe that there is some room to do it in a slow approach where we will have the benefit of watching the market react. And the consultant did recommend a phase-in approach, if we want to say what the consultant said on, you know, we can cherry pick everything he said, but he did recommend that as well.
All right. Let's see now. I'm not seeing any other speakers. Oh, Councillor Steves.
Just a very quick comment. The development community hasn't phased in the increase, the 14 increase over the past year. When the price goes up, it goes up, and there's absolutely no reason we should have to phase this in when they're making such a massive profit on their lands already. And I would suggest we could be going up to 20%, and it wouldn't hurt them.
All right. Councillor Day.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Brody. It says that the 15% is for the city center, and on page 241, the economic analysis by J.P. Rollo and Associates said 15% was determined to be appropriate for a wide range of developments inside the city center. It should stay as it is.
I'll just point out that the cash and lieu rates talk about city center or outside the city center. There's a differential there. Okay, I'm not seeing any more speakers on the amendment. So those, I'll call the question on the amendment to phase it in over a couple of years. All those in favor? Okay, so here in the council chamber, we've got Councilors McPhail, Liu, McNulty, Hobbs. Anybody else out there? Okay, those opposed? Okay, so I see Councilor Au, Steves, Wolf, Day, and the mayor opposed. So that is defeated. Okay, so then we don't need to talk about phasing in the grandfathering. So let's go to the rental. Okay, so this is number 3. And, okay, so now you have an expectation of 10%, and you can see it there for more than 60 units, or cash in lieu if it's 5 to 60. So, is anybody proposing anything on that? I think Councillor Au, I see your hand.
Yes, Your Worship, I would like to propose an amendment to send this back to staff.
It'd be a referral.
Referral, yes. And my suggestion is that staff be directed to study a proportional approach, and also explore the possibility of increasing the threshold as well as the percentage of the mandatory market rental units. I don't want to specify a number now, but
all right, so you want to refer 3 and 6 back. So to staff, right now, without bringing in something new, we have no rule on rentals, do we? It's just voluntary right now, right?
That is correct.
Okay, I should have asked for a seconder. Is there a seconder to refer 3 and 6 back? All right, so that's moved and seconded. All right. Did you want to say more about it?
Yes, basically.
Because I think you've already addressed it, frankly.
But I just want to mention that probably, especially for increasing the threshold as well as the number of our percentage of units to require, I think should be considered because I think it's more viable and also makes the work for staff less tedious. Because I think, if we work with 20 developers and then at the end we get 100 units, I think it's much better, if we are just getting the same number of units by working with 2 bigger projects. Right. So it saves staff time and energy and lots of other things. So I think we should at least consider it.
Councilor McNulty.
Yeah, I thank you, Your Worship. I did second it, so Councillor Howe could have the floor on it, and it's only fair that he has an opportunity to speak and give his mind. I have a question for you to staff, Your Worship. Have we not, or have I not already made a referral to look at incentives for rental, to further look at incentives? Because in the report, there's very little on incentives for market rental. And I thought I'd made a referral from planning at one time, and we haven't had it back. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mr. Hopkins, that seems to be.
Through your worship. Yeah, through your worship, Councillor McNulty, there was a referral on incentives, which is part of the market rental housing policy work that we're doing. I would recognize that, yes, it's not explicit in the reports, but a lot of the incentives that we have are already built into our bylaws. And as was mentioned before, the incentives for density bonusing and parking are essentially a minimum and a beginning that we can negotiate further incentives through the development application process, which would then be considered by council.
Yeah, I guess my biggest question is the incentives, and it's the parking regulations, not only for cars, but also for bicycles and what have you. The number in there, I think in Lemur it's 0.54, and I'd like to even see that be smaller. I think people should be taking public transit, to be quite frank with you, and not having an opportunity to park. But anyhow, that's just my only comment, and that's really wasn't seconded to have it. I think I'd like to revisit that another time at Planning Committee for further incentives to get more Lemur. Okay, I think we need to look at some of our ratios. I still think they're too high, but that's just a personal opinion this time. And also I'm hearing that from the development community. There's no carrot, there's only a stick on the parking. And I think it's something we should be looking at in the whole downtown core. We've got a new bus terminal in the downtown core, expansion on the SkyTrain. We should be looking at that as well. Thank you, Worship.
But to staff, those incentives, you're still looking at those, aren't you? Isn't that what you said?
To your worship, yes, we are still looking at that. It's not part of this particular package, but we are still looking at it.
That's my point. Councillor Liu.
Support this because we can still pick the 10%, and I think if it comes back with or after the rental tenure, when that comes back, I think it can all then be looked at it holistically, and we can have a really much clearer concept of where we're going with this. I think, yes, we want rental. Yes, there's multiple ways of getting it. We want developers to run to Richmond to come and build it. We don't want projects just being shelved for months and years at a time until the land price finally adjusts itself accordingly. I think we want this stuff to actually get built in the next few years so we actually get the housing. So I'd agree with looking at it more closely.
Councillor Day.
Very much, Mayor Brody. I won't be supporting the amendment to refer it back because number 8 clearly states that staff will report back to council regarding key findings related to the implementation of the updates. And then there'll be program provisions and they'll be coming back to us on a regular basis. And also, staff have already mentioned tonight that there are market rental incentives and that the density bonuses have actually been in place for over a decade. So I feel that this motion is redundant and all it's going to do is slow down the process. So I think that we should reject the motion to refer it back and move forward.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair. I can support the motion because I had a lot of questions about this particular portion of the report. So, and there are a lot of good things that Richmond has been doing, which I won't list off because you're all aware of them, but the public maybe isn't so much aware of them. But a lot of good projects have been done under this program, including Kiwanis and Pathways, and that's coming up, and the stories. But I just want to be clear that I did have another amendment related to this, so you've kind of combined different numbers. So just after we're done dealing with this amendment, if I could speak.
Oh, yes, after we're done with this, I'll be asking what else? I know
Okay.
Councillor Liu has something, and
Thank you.
yeah, there's bound to be more. Let me see. Councillor Steves.
Yeah, thank you. I won't be supporting the amendment either. I think that we should pass the motion as is, and then the amendment afterwards. We can make those changes later. And for those that are concerned that we're going to drive business out, I'd like to remind council, most of them weren't on council at the time, but way back in 2008 or so, we decided we were going to require housing, the housing around transit centers to provide community centers, to provide this, to provide that. We had all kinds of developers saying, we're going to leave Richmond. Well, they didn't. Some of them did, and we got new developers come in. We had absolutely no problem when we started heavy negotiations to require the developers to put in now the things normally we would have had to buy on increased taxes and pay off over a long period of time. Basically, Richmond is a very desirable place to come to, and if you lose a couple of developers, so be it. You'll get a lot more to take their place.
Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question through you to staff. If this was to go ahead, to do this kind of research into looking at different scenarios of sliding scale, is that something staff could do, or would we have to hire a consultant? And what do you think is an appropriate timeline?
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, it would probably be a combination of staff work and specialist input as well, kind of like this project with Mr. Mulholland involved. And I would expect that it would probably be about 6 months.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to call the question on the motion to refer this back for the reasons that have been stated. All those in favor? So I see Councillors Liu, McPhail, Au, McNulty, Hobbs. Anyone else out there? Okay, those opposed. I see Councillor Steves, Day, Wolf, and the mayor opposed, so that is carried. What else? Councillor Liu, I think you had something more. Remind us on that.
Yes, Your Worship, I had a referral for staff to come back with options that will treat the affordable housing contribution received from single-family and townhouses more equitably.
Now, just a minute. Just treat townhouses.
And single-family homes more equitably. So right now, if you're a single-family home, you subdivide, you put 2 houses there. If you put a suite in, you don't have to pay the affordable housing. Right now, if you build a bunch of townhouses, you have to pay the affordable housing on all of them, even if you put micro suites in a whole bunch of them. So should we not charge them on the micro suites, or should we stop giving that loophole to single family?
All
We
right,
should come
so
back
this-
with options for the 2.
This is a general referral you're making.
This is a general referral.
Okay, so the question to me You'd ask staff to compare,
To come back with options of how to treat the single
well,
family and townhouses.
to analyze and give us options in terms of,
Affordable housing contribution for single family and townhouses.
that's Lemur.
Yes.
Lemur contributions for single family and townhouse. Let's see,
Unless, of course, we're going to contemplate micro units in apartments, which I
well,
don't think we're there
I
yet.
think that would be involved there. So it's the rates in number 2 versus
app-
the community amenity contributions. Is that what you're saying? No?
How they're, it's the underlying rules of when they're applied, of when you have to pay them. Because in a single-family house, if you put in a suite, you don't have to pay it.
Okay, but isn't that the community amenity contribution?
No, it's the lemur.
Thought we had established, staff, help us out here.
Staff just told us that they didn't have to pay it, so.
Your Worship,
That's outside
Yeah.
of this resolution.
it is a little bit outside. We can certainly take a referral on it. I don't think it affects number 2 tonight, which I think has already passed. Historically, single family was dealt with, I think it's fair to say, a little more leniently. And I think it's probably time to, if we get a referral, to revisit that. And as was mentioned, one option would be to bring the single family up to a similar level of contribution to townhouses and other forms.
All right, so what I hear is that it would be a referral to look at the single-family dwelling and the townhouse cash contribution for Lemur as to compare and contrast it to the other amenity contributions. No?
Sure. I just want townhouses treated the same way that single families are. I think that single families are getting a bit of a free ride here, and if we're going to give the free rides out, then townhouses should get them, or we should collect from the single families, so.
Okay,
So we want options for those two things, so.
okay, please frame how you want the wording of your motion.
Well, I thought might come back with options to treat single family and townhouse, lemur, cash in lieu equitably.
Well, yeah, because the number 2, you say number 2 is passed. No, we didn't amend it. But it's there, I mean, the rate is there. Are you wanting a different rate? I mean,
No, the
don't you want
circumstances,
to refer back, if you want, refer it back to look at the rates? The rates in number 2 are from the economic study, and they're related to the increases in number 1.
yeah, I wasn't talking about changing the rate. I was talking about the underlying rule of when they pay it out. Single-family homes aren't paying it as often as the townhouses are because they build a suite. But if you put a micro suite in your townhouse, you don't get that same consideration.
Okay, is there something wrong with number 2, or is it that the rules surrounding the
The rules
balance of it-
surrounding how they collect it make it unfair.
So it's something besides number 2 that is not fair.
The underlying application of the rule of when and how they receive those dollar contributions.
The Lemur contributions? Isn't number 2 just straightforward?
Well, we're not sending back number 2, we're
Well, no one sent it back yet, and I'm not suggesting
This is
that
a
we would.
referral to just come back with options to change the underlying rules to make it fair and equitable. It could be after, we can do it after we pass the motion.
Okay, let's come back to you after we deal with what's on the floor.
Okay.
Okay, what else do we want to take a look at? More referrals, anything else that needs to be addressed? So right now, number 3 and 6, have been referred back. And I suppose, because number 7 talks about the grandfathering of market rentals, it would be number 7 to the extent that it talks about market rentals, right? Okay? So that's the only change that's been made. Councillor Hobbs.
And thank you through the chair. So, dealing with different combinations of numbers here, I may be a little bit behind, and you may suggest that this is already being dealt with, but let me just read out a proposed referral motion, and it could be number 10, or it might fit in somewhere. But it has to do with parking ratios for market rentals. And I'll read it out first, and if you want me to comment, I will. That staff be directed to review and report to council regarding the reduction of parking requirements for purpose-built brackets 100% rental buildings within proximity of the Canada line. That's the referral.
Okay, that's not what we're talking about. Number 3 is just a part of a building. But
Sure, well, you can tell me where it fits in then, because we've been going back and forth.
we can make it number 10. Just a minute, number 9. Number 10 would be to directing staff to take a look at the required parking ratios for market rental buildings.
You said 100%.
Right, okay, that's a market rental building, is 100%.
That's right. And if you want, I'll make a couple comments on it.
But first of all, let's get the motion. Is that what you want? Or do you want to limit it to the city center? Or do you have any other variations?
We can add on city center. I mean, in my mind, the Canada line for the most part is in the city center, but, okay.
Okay, so it would be to look at the parking ratios for 100% market rental buildings in the city center.
That's right.
Okay, do you want to move that? Okay, so is that seconded? So it's moved and seconded. Go ahead.
Well, it's pretty basic. I've heard everybody on council talk about this issue, the need to have more purpose-built market rental buildings, 100% market rental, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's needed, and in particular, in the city center in close proximity to the Canada line, the parking ratios, there is potential to have them down to, I think, as low as 0.54, but generally they've been higher, and so what I'd be looking, I'd even put a number in there of 0.5 if I was putting a number in as low as that, because I think that we have to concentrate on getting, more heads in beds and fewer cars and stalls, and I think within proximity, I think our policy is 400 meters of the Canada line. It makes sense to have a lower parking ratio, which will allow for more units to be built and will incentivize further building of purpose-built rentals, which I think is important.
Okay, so that's your motion. It's moved and seconded to add on number 10. Let's see, we've got Councillor McNulty.
Your Worship, I agree with the philosophy, and I would have moved that, but I would look at any all-purpose rental buildings. I don't think it should be limited to the city center. If you're a block away from Gilbert, or you happen to be in Seafair, and it's purposely built, I think we should be looking at reduced parking restrictions so that we can get more rental. We have an arterial policy that we need to have market rental anywhere along arterial lines, and if we can get that, I think that should be applied to that. So I don't like the idea of just restricting it to the city center. I think we should have, why is the city, and I know why the city center is, and I support it, but I think we're cutting our nose off in spite of our face by not including it everywhere in Richmond. We have an adequate transportation system to get people to A to B.
Okay, I'll ask the mover, can you live without it being in the city center? It's just generally your market rental. Okay. Okay.
I won't cut your nose off either.
Okay, Councillor Steves.
Yeah, thanks. I've actually talked to young people on the Canada line who have told me they have no interest in having a car as long as they live close enough to the Canada line. And it seems to me, in this particular motion, that effectively you could have a building with no parking, and of course the only people that could live there would be people that wouldn't have a car. It's simply because there's simply no place else to park. So I think that just might work. We've got to figure out how to do it, but I think it could work, and I think there would be quite a few people that would prefer to have lower cost housing and forgo the car.
Don't forget, the referral isn't to figure out how do we get to zero. It's what are the appropriate parking ratios when you've got a totally market rental building, and wherever it is. Okay, Councillor Al, let's.
Yeah, I just want to ask, is there a timeline for this to come back? Are we talking
How
about 6
quick,
months?
staff, how quickly can you bring that back?
Your Worship, I would expect that would take about 6 months to.
Okay, I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor? Those opposed? Anybody opposed? So that is carried. Okay, so that's now number 10. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to call the question then on the entire matter. Yes, Councillor Hobbs.
I wasn't quick enough with my hand raising, sorry. There is one other thing. I didn't know what number you were on. So if I could, there's one more amendment I'd like to recommend, and that is to do with number 9. So if you look at number 9, it talks about feasibility of reducing waivers, DCCs, and that kind of thing. You can read it, but it's very specific. And rental rates establish standard low-end market rentals. And that's a good thing, and I completely support it, but just like the last one, I think it can also include market rental buildings, 100% market rental buildings could be included in that. So my amendment would simply be, after rates, the last word, just say, and for 100% market rental buildings, and see what comes back.
Staff, don't we already have a referral outstanding on that one? Looking at the development cost charges.
To your worship, we're currently reviewing our DCC charge bylaw, but we don't have a referral on looking at affordable housing reductions or the feasibility of them.
So, okay, so Councillor Hobbs, you want to make it reducing for any rental building?
Well, just to clarify, it's only studying the feasibility, so I don't see why we'd exclude that. It might come back saying it's not feasible.
So I think after development cost charges for any 100% rental building.
I just add on, and for 100% market rental buildings.
Well, we don't need what's there under what you're saying. So staff be directed to review the feasibility of reducing or waiving development cost charges for any 100% rental building. Okay? So that's moved and seconded. Discussion on that one? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. Okay. Other stuff. Okay. I'm going to call I think you all know the amendments that have been made. I'm going to call the question on the entire matter.
We were supposed to be voting on these separately, isn't that why?
Oh, I said we're not voting on it separately. We're voting on it as a unit after we go through it separately. Everybody's had their chance to make their amendments, deletions, and additions. All those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried. Okay, so we're coming back to Councillor Liu.
Yeah,
You wanted to make an amendment or a referral?
a referral. I'd like to refer to staff to come back with options to treat the application of the lemur charges between single-family houses and townhouses the same.
Okay, and that's without compromising what we passed
That's not the
tonight.
price, that's not the amount, it's how they
Okay,
collect them.
okay. So does everybody have the motion? So that's moved and it's seconded. Everyone got it? Okay, we'll call the question. I'm not seeing any question or hands up. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried with Councillor Day and Councillor Wolf opposed. Anything else on that? We could go on. Okay,
But we're not finished yet, don't fool yourself.
well, yeah, but we're closer to the end. That brings us to public announcements, and from the closed meeting this afternoon, the following were appointed for terms to expire on December 31st, 2022, to fill vacancies on the Richmond Heritage Commission, Brenda Clark and Joe Fry. Then we have a few events. The Diversity Symposium, the city is hosting its annual Diversity Symposium. This year it's October 18th to the 22nd, so residents, volunteers, and professionals are invited to join this free online conference about sharing and advancing equality, diversity, and inclusion in our community. This is obviously an important and popular opportunity to build knowledge and gain tools to make Richmond stronger and more inclusive. So if you want more information on that, go to our website. It's that time of year when we have the street banner contest. Give a reminder that the banner program is coming to an end with voting closing this coming Sunday, October 17th. So over the next few days, you can choose which of the 20 shortlisted designs will appear on the city streets in 2022. So if you want to review the finalists and cast your ballot, go to richmond.ca/banners. The Friends of the Richmond Library are at it again. They're going to hold another popular book sale at the Cambie branch, 11590 Cambie Road, this coming Saturday, October 16th, starting at 10 o'clock, weather permitting. So a wide variety of gently used books ranging from fiction, children's, Chinese language, and many nonfiction categories will be on sale with incredibly low prices. Reminder that sales are cash only. All proceeds will benefit the Richmond Public Library. So if you want more information on that, go to richmond.ca events. And finally, it's Islamic Heritage Month. October has been proclaimed by the Parliament of Canada. This started in 2007 to recognize the significant contributions the Muslim community has made to Canadian society. Muslim Canadians enrich our lives and contribute to the prosperity and heritage of our country in so many ways. And this month is an opportunity to reflect on and learn more about the history of Islam in Canada and the cultural diversity of Canada's largest Muslim community. So with that, Madam Clerk, bylaws for adoption.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 3 bylaws for final adoption, with the third bylaw having noted opposition.
Moved.
Second.
Moved 1 and 2. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And on the third one?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? It's carried with Councillor Day and Wolf opposed. And Development Permit Panel.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 2 recommendations for Council. Recommendation 1, that the minutes of the Development Permit Panel meeting held on September 29th and the Chair's report for the Development Permit Panel meetings held on November 14th, 2018, February 13th, 2019, and January 13th, 2021 be received for information. And recommendation 2, that the recommendations of the panel to authorize the issuance of a development permit for the property at 9880 Granville Avenue and 7031 Number 4 Road, a development permit for the property at 8280, 8282, and 8300 and 8320 Number 3 Road, and a development permit for the property at 7464, 7480, 7500, 7520, 7540, 7560, 7580, and 7600 Number 1 Road be endorsed and the permits so issued.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Someone move adjournment. Thank you. We are now adjourned.